Welcome everyone to our today's webinar. We will be talking about scaling leadership development with AI and many other learnings. And yeah, hopefully learning as much as possible from the successes ZoomInfo has had around these topics in the recent months. My name is Kantola. I'm a co-founder of Teamspective, and together with our team, we work with dozens of companies to set up and improve the leadership enablement in companies. The smaller ones are startups, the largest have tens of thousands of employees, so really a large range. And I'm really happy today to have Hazel join us all the way from San Francisco. And she's the Senior Director of Leadership and Development at ZoomInfo. So good morning to you, Hazel.
Good morning. Well, good evening to you. And also good morning and good evening to the folks attending as well. It's good to meet everyone.
Excellent. But today's agenda is as follows. I'll share some insights about the biggest HR investment trends soon, where most companies are investing the money and efforts this year. And yeah, most of the time we'll use discussing with Hazel about leadership development at ZoomInfo, and then we'll have the Q&A session as mentioned already. But now to get started, I have a question to think about. So what's the best way to know where companies have their most important problems or the greatest opportunities that they want to address? And one of the best ways to learn that is to look at where their top priorities or investments areas are. And in HR, these, what you can see on the screen, are the top 5 according to a pretty large study done by Gartner for this year. And you can see many familiar topics here, the number 1 being leader and manager development. But also organizational culture, change management, and HR technology are really highly dependent on the company's leaders. Or have you seen a lot of successful change management happening without the leaders knowing what to do? So I don't think so. So clearly leadership is a big opportunity and also a challenge that most companies are investing to solve and improve this year. The Gartner study further validates this with some other data points. They, for example, found that 3 out of 4 HR leaders think their managers are not equipped to take care of all the responsibilities assigned to them. So they are overwhelmed with the responsibilities. And that is a huge problem. That is a problem that leads to the organization underperforming compared to the full potential that they have. And well, every organization has some good leaders, but too high amount of mediocre leadership can be an issue. And there's many ways to know how an organization is not performing to the full potential. Some of them mentioned here on this slide. So going clockwise, there could be issues in collaboration, teams forming silos or resorting to like us versus them thinking. The leader behaviors might be misaligned, making it hard to create any scalable solutions or common practices. People might be lacking feedback or lacking psychological safety, leaving issues unaddressed. The managers might not have time or skills to do proactive team development. Or lastly, the slow performance management might be happening and resulting in the kind of poor performers not getting the support or management that they would need. But one important question here is like, what is preventing improvements in the leadership quality then, if everyone knows this is an issue? So if you got the Menti open, we'll get the first question there. All right, I think we are starting to have some conclusions from this group. So yeah, most common one being leaders too busy. But yes, obviously some improvements areas on the other side, other areas like, well, leadership training or setting up the processes. We have been asking this same question from a lot of other HR leaders as well in different forums, and here are the results from there. Quite aligned, I would say. And yeah, while of course all of these topics have an impact, and everyone has restrictions on the resources. It's always by far the most common that leaders are too busy. They're too busy to learn, or too busy to dive deep into the issues, or too busy to pay attention to the most important topics if they feel at all too complex or challenging. And one thing that this means is that even if you in your role would identify that, hey, this is where we have gaps in leader skills or leader actions or data, providing more assets or support might actually make leaders more busy. So we are making this first bottleneck even worse. So that's why it's really important that in this time, we look for ways to achieve better impacts while also finding ways to require the leaders to do less. And I think some of the things that Hazel will share with us will provide good examples of that. I can still provide one top-level example of a solution as well. So, well, Teamspective's platform is being built to solve the challenge of busy leaders, resulting in this mediocre leadership. So the solution here happens in two parts. So first, helping companies capture data more easily. So ideally, that means automatically without anyone doing anything, but at least it means making it as easy as possible. So for example, sending surveys directly to Slack instead of logging in somewhere else, and so on. And then taking all that data and your company's guidelines and other resources and using the software and AI to automate most of the leader actions. So what that means is like combining all the data, identifying the high priority insights from there, planning what the leader should do, and then giving guidance to the leader to act independently there. So helping far more leaders know what actions to take and get there. Obviously, leaders need to remain responsible for taking the actions and understanding the big picture, but this process can cut their workload and lead to better, more objective decisions then. So that's one way to solve it. But now let's move on to discussing with Hazel and maybe welcome her to the stage with some digital claps. The reactions. Let's see if you know how to use
love it.
Perfect. All right. But yeah, Hazel, well, you have a lot of experience. I think it was 18 years of developing and coaching leaders across all the levels, from starting managers to very, very senior executives, like in your current role at ZoomInfo. And yeah, you've been building the portfolio of leadership development programs and, well, coaching even the top execs in your company. And previously you've been working in companies like Pure Storage, Lending Club, and Salesforce. I believe everyone should be very familiar with. So a lot of very, very good experience in there. But yeah, let's maybe start from kind of introductory topic. So like, could you share a bit about how ZoomInfo is approaching the leadership development? What is your model or framework?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm so happy to be here. So thank you, Teamspective team, and Jose for your invitation. I would say at a high level, our approach to leadership development is really focusing on practical content, really thinking a lot about what our leaders' challenges are and how we can help them be able to transfer what they're learning in the classroom back into the role. I think that's a lot of us in HR leadership development really focus on as we create content. But essentially at a high level, when I first came into ZoomInfo about a year and a half ago, based on my conversations with leaders, conversations with HR, that our leaders are really, really good at driving the business. If you're not familiar with ZoomInfo, we are a go-to-market intelligence company. We service other organizations, and we essentially provide a lot of amazing tools to help go-to-market teams grow their business. So it's a very sales-heavy company. We definitely have a an overall challenge where leaders are too busy because obviously we would rather not take the time that they would be spending selling to their customers, right? So they're really good at driving the business, but they really could use some tools around better engaging their team, better managing their team, coaching, etc. So we came up with this mission around let's really help our leaders better balance the business with people leadership. And this is actually tied to our company values. A lot of it too is just really making the content real for our leaders. We do seek industry leading content expertise, just I would imagine many of you do, but we sort of tweak them a little bit, really adjust the language to make it less academic, less fluffy, and a lot more catchy, but also something where our leaders can really instantly understand what they're learning, and for them to really kind of translate those into actual behaviors and actual tools they can take on the job. We also really focus a lot on live discussion. Our leaders really love that. We do provide a combination of hybrid and in person. We're doing a lot more in person now. And our leaders really just love the opportunity to get together because they would otherwise normally wouldn't. And then I would say one thing that we also adopt in leadership development is there is no one size fits all, right? And so we definitely look at different levels of our leaders, from even emerging managers all the way to our VPs and SVPs, and also the leaders in the middle. I'm not sure if you're sharing the slides, Jose, but we can definitely show, and then they can get an idea of what we offer. Awesome. So it looks like a lot here on the slide, but we put this together in order to help our leaders identify, where do I get started? What are the types of programs that are right for me? Just quick context, our company has about 3,500 employees globally, and then we have about 600 to 650 people leaders across the board. So what you will see here from left to right are our frontline leaders, and then our mid-level leaders on the director role, and then also our VPs and above. And we also really think about how we can help them prepare for launch. So we have programs that are sort of core topics around how to lead at ZoomInfo. And then we also have cohort programs, a combination of external programs, including fireside chats that are available to everyone. So those are offerings around preparing for current role. So they are in the current role, and we just want to make sure that they continue to be successful. And then you will see that the bottom is a little bit blank. That's because we're starting to create some really targeted, some really experience-based development for our high potential leaders. And so at that level, we really are moving a little bit away from the formal classroom, but more around how do we get our high potentials and successors prepared for a potential next level role. And then finally, we can't forget our employees. We do provide formal learning programs. We're starting to curate content around AI and curate content around AI as well.
Yeah, and that's a really, I guess, like impressive mix of things, and like you said, like tailoring or finding something that fits for every different type of person and situation. I guess that when the list gets longer, there's always temptation to add more. You also need to think quite a lot on like, well, what to remove and so on. So I guess that would be one relevant question here, like what maybe even quite common practices have you decided to remove from the leadership development, and why would that be? And before you answer, I'll open up the stage also in Menti. So if you in the audience have any quick examples here, what have you removed from the leadership development? Feel free to post there. Yeah, but Hazel, feel free to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear what you've been thinking about and doing to better enhance your offerings. As Jose mentioned, it does look like a lot. When I first started, we had a few, but they were a little bit disconnected and the content needed to be refreshed, meaning they really needed to be at the level and at the pace in which our leaders are evolving, because business moves really fast. Our business moves even faster. And so one of the things that we really wanted to not do a lot of are off the shelf and broad leadership frameworks. And that was actually one of the reasons that we love partnering with Teamspective, because the 360 assessment that we use with them is not about this research that had been done for decades. I think I'm not going to mention names of vendors, but you may have come across those types of solutions. And the reason why we chose not to do that is because they tend to be overly general. A lot of them seems a little bit outdated in terms of where our leaders need to be. And what I've observed is that using those kind of traditional 360s, our leaders sort of glaze their eyes when I'm talking about the methodology. And first of all, it takes almost forever just to be explaining what the methodology is, rather than really diving into the feedback that they received, how they reacted to that feedback, what are they taking away. And that is one of the things that we really appreciate about the solution that we have with Teamspective. We are also making sure that we're not taking up more of our leaders' time. And so really being able to integrate the 360 survey in Slack it's so new. I was really amazed by that, because traditional vendors would typically use email. Hopefully none of them do paper anymore, but they do tend to use email that just kind of tends to get lost. And they tend to be really long as well. Talking about 30, 40, even more than 50 questions. And the survey that we ended up creating with Teamspective is 15 questions, and they're aligned to the expectations of our leaders at ZoomInfo.
Right. So kind of like, well, in the end, I guess you're getting quite close to the same kind of impacts after rethinking the approach and cutting off the excess, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably even more impact with it being shorter and not having to be the focus on the methodology, but again, rather, how do we better get an idea of how this leader is showing up? And then in turn, how do we help them understand the feedback? Because really the point of the 360 assessment for us is to help our leaders grow. It doesn't matter what level you are in the organization. You always have the opportunity to grow and develop. And that was really what we needed. And we are really happy with the solution that we have in place in partnership with your team.
Yeah. And how so let's say you had this like survey before with around 60 questions, now it's 50. Like how many people are answering to that usually? Let's say you do the 360 for one leader.
Yeah, so typically we would have about at least 15 raters for a leader. We don't really have a maximum number. In some cases 8. But I think what's really critical is that the leaders are thinking about, again, like those around them, that 360 view, their manager, their direct team, and then their peers and stakeholders. We do some additional steps around reviewing their rater list. And then even prior to that, we educate them about who are the type of raters they should select. So we have a 10-minute recorded video about the 360 assessment and what they should be thinking about with their raters, because we want to help them get a pretty objective and unbiased feedback. But they're not going to get that if they give us folks who are their fans or their closest allies. Yes, definitely include them, but perhaps they may want to include other folks that they may be working on challenges or building a relationship so they can get balanced feedback.
Yeah. Excellent. I'll share some. We got some inputs on Menti on this topic. So what practices have been removed seem to be quite along on the same kind of thinking as you were mentioning. So very long surveys. Yeah, maybe reducing the amount of people. Well, the first one had also then you could actually collect the feedback more frequently if it's short enough, kind of getting good insights on the quality. Yeah, not going to big lecture type of trainings ties nicely into the personalization. And yeah, I think the last one, it's a trend, at least I've seen in a lot of discussions, that the kind of there's pros and cons also in the self-direction, and there should be a balance that fits the company culture. Usually tends to be the either extreme of that topic is usually not the ideal for most companies.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about then, well, you mentioned about the kind of collecting feedback a lot and how you have guided the leaders there and so on. Then how about the kind of, you do the debriefs with those senior leaders? Any changes that you have applied there?
Yeah, absolutely. And so because we have been able to shorten the survey, our debriefs have really transformed from 90 minutes, believe it or not, into 45 minutes. And that has really helped not just us, but also the leader really actually focus on just their individual development. And the reason why our old debrief was 90 minutes was because I just had to take sometimes half an hour just explaining the methodology to them, just so they can understand what the stats meant, how are they, who are they being compared to, what are the high low scores mean, whatever, etc. So that's really not the case with our 360 assessment, because now it's AI generated, and then they're able to easily see their scores across the different raters, and it's pretty straightforward because it's just based on a simple rating scale, as you would have probably see in engagement scores as a people manager. But I would also say that our debrief have become less formal, and then really just have become more of a conversation. As Jose mentioned, I also coach our leaders as well, and I'm able to really bring my coaching strengths to ask questions, gauge where the leaders are at, and be able to really get those takeaways from them on what they're going to be focusing on for development and how myself or my team can support.
Got it. Yeah, and I think this was one of the topics that we worked quite extensively on together. There's now on the screen like an example report that would be one asset that you are using in this. So kind of providing a summary that should be very easy to grasp, and then as needed, more detailed scores and even the original feedbacks, which there obviously would be a lot of.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the other thing too that, so this is more of a printout because we want to provide multiple options for our leaders to view the results. So they can obviously view it on the Teamspective platform. And then as we do the debrief, it is kind of nice to kind of have this printout and be able to go through it in a bit more cleaner way. But what I want to say is that if they get additional feedback, this report will just automatically update, right? In traditional 360s, it's like another survey process it would have to do. There's like a start and the end. And so I think that really takes away from the continuous nature of feedback. And so what we really love about this tool is we don't really have to reopen the survey or have to re-administer and restart. It's the link is there. We just add raters. They get the survey, but from the participants' point of view and our point of view, it's in that one report, if that makes sense. And that really makes it a lot more flexible, agile, and just really super easy for us and for the participants to see their feedback on an ongoing basis as well.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I think you mentioned some of the benefits already, but like following these changes you did, like redeciding what questions to use, how you deliver or collect the feedback, how you do the debriefs and everything. So kind of what kind of impacts have you seen for the leaders, for yourself, for the company?
Yeah, so it's really positive to see that our leaders are actually wanting to do the 360s for their team members. Now that is probably unheard of in many companies, because the traditional perception is that these 360s are arduous and long, and it's not helpful, because if it was not helpful to them, why would they even recommend it to their team? And so it's really nice to see that there's been increased usage. Bye, Lida. Thanks for joining. It's really nice to see that our leaders are finding the value and they themselves are promoting it in a way that it's driven by them, and that they want their own leaders under them to be using it. So that's amazing for us. And then I think additional impact is just overall positive feedback from our leaders. They find it really easy. It's right on Slack. And what I mean by that is it's not us putting a link on Slack. Other providers do that too, even technology survey platforms. It's really, truly generated directly into Slack. And they see a Teamspective app from our leader standpoint, and they just literally just click on start, and then they just complete the items, and it's really super easy. I think one of the last thing I would mention are the development suggestions. So as you can see in this sample report, the feedback that our leaders get are totally personal to them, is customized. They get a lot of written feedback, and so the AI summaries really help them just get a really good level, broad picture of what are their strengths, where they need to focus on. And the report also provides developmental suggestions that are very personal. So it's just super helpful and super targeted for the leaders themselves.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I think my favorite highlight from that was, which I really haven't heard many times in my life, that the leaders actually wanted more 360s.
Right? But they do. So sweet.
Yeah, I think completely the opposite of what I've been hearing for all these years. So that's, yeah, fantastic work on that front. I think we can continue the discussion and jump into the Q&A part. So if there's any questions, feel free to post to the chat. And meanwhile, I'll start with one, which would be like, if like you still had any more tips for another company that wants to kind of make similar improvements. Is there something you still haven't mentioned? Any final tips?
Yes, I would say I would have 3 tips. So the first one would be, if you're interested in making this type of improvement in your 360 programs and you want to build a business case, definitely do a pilot with a smaller group. That's what we did when we were first partnering up with Teamspective, and that really helped us gain influence and buy-in, but also just feedback on how we can improve the questions we're asking, just overall process. So it's a win-win overall. The second thing I would also recommend is consider tying this 360s with your programs. So as we've shown earlier in some of our programs, especially for our directors and senior directors, we are implementing a 360 assessment as part of their cohort journey. And then they get a group debrief. So our VPs would typically get a one-on-one debrief from myself or one of my team members. But for our directors, we do scale it further by doing some group debriefs. And then I would really want to make sure that you're designing the questions based on what is truly important for your company. What do you expect your leaders to be demonstrating what success looks like for them, I would really want to make sure that you choose questions and construct those questions in a way that is really relevant for your own organization. Yeah, those are my tips.
Lovely. Yeah. Yeah, and it's been very extensive, extensive amount of tips and learnings and experience that you shared. So thank you very much, Hazel. And
Yeah,
so far, I don't see any more questions. Oh, well, now Laura
we do have one.
asking. So let's do it. What's the best way to measure long-term engagement trends beyond just survey results for leadership commitment? This would be important. So do you have anything on that, Hazel?
What's the best way to measure long-term engagement trends? Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it also depends on what type of data you're looking for. And I think also the organization that you're in. I think the survey is definitely the easiest way to measure that. But I think, some interesting metrics I think to look at actually would be your new hire retention. So the people that you're hiring in your company, how long are they staying? Are they leaving sooner? Are they also satisfied even? Because their perception and their thoughts about your company and how they're feeling, I think is also a reflection of how truly you're aligned with your culture. So I would say really looking at your new hires is a good indicator. One of the indicators, but I'm interested to hear, just say what you think or other folks in the call.
Yeah, I would say also it's a really good one, the new hire, because you, as a leader, with someone who has been in the company for a long time, they already have a lot of context of why that works like that and why that works like that. Whereas for a new hire, you kind of really need to get it right really fast for it to work. So I think that's a very good example there. Yeah, I think overall there's like many types of data that could be repurposed depending on how you run it. But of course, like companies run the engagement surveys, depending on the questions you have there, it might also help there. Some platforms allow you to target some questions to the leaders specifically if you want to understand the leaders' kind of comfort levels or engagement and so on. Well, at Teamspective, we also look at this kind of network analysis of people and kind of how many people you are interacting with on a weekly or monthly basis, and is there any trends or differences in that? That could be one indicator. Usually someone who is kind of disengaging will reduce the amount of effort they put into networking with everyone or collaborating. That would be another one. I guess also depending on how you run the other parts of the company, you might see some changes in like how proactive someone is on a goal or kind of contributing to some common initiatives and so on. So these are at least some of my top of mind. Yeah, but it's a very broad topic.
Yes, I think actually Salesforce did this. They looked at the amount of inquiries, questions, and requests to, I think it's like their employee assistance program. So, and the reason they wanted to look at that, because that's a good indication of are people burned out? Are people stressed out? Are they asking for a lot more kind of mental health assistance? And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. But at that time, I think the organization recognized that there may be some kind of theme of burnout, happening across the company. There were a lot of changes being rolled out at that time that I was working there, and that is about almost 10 years ago. And actually, I thought that was an interesting statistic of kind of looking at that from more of a overall health perspective. I would say exit interviews are, if that's something that you do, Laura, that should yield some helpful data as well.
Yeah. Good list, I think, came out of that question. Sally was asking also, do you have any experience with stay interviews? That also could contribute. I guess there might be some overlap as well, depending again what you include in the interviews or surveys. But have you, Hazel, been involved in those?
Yeah, absolutely. So stay interviews are a really proactive way for managers to continue to have that pulse on engagement within their team. And it doesn't cost a lot. It doesn't take a lot of time. From an HR perspective, you might want to give them, let's say, 2 or 3 questions to ask around the notion of the stay interview, and the managers can leverage their one-on-one. So that's sort of the mechanics. I think, one caveat to think about there is how much level of trust do the team members have in their leader. So if there is high level of trust, they would probably likely be more open. They would probably be able to give that manager some direct feedback, like, hey, maybe you could do this even better, this X, Y, and Z, whatever behavior. But unfortunately, if there's lack of trust, I'm not really sure how much value there might be with a stay interview from the manager's standpoint if the team members are not going to be open. So I would just want to make sure to take that into consideration. But I think as a management and leadership tool, a stay interview is a great way to kind of get ahead of disengagement. I think what I would also recommend, and we actually do that here at ZoomInfo, is if you're familiar with the Netflix, I think it's called their Keeper test. We have some version of that. And then that is also a great way to be able to see if this employee is someone that is engaged enough and motivated enough, and that you want to do your utmost effort to keep them. So I think that's another great source of questions. But a lot of it is just a conversation from the manager, like checking in, like, hey, how are you doing? Do you feel supported? What can I do to support you? And even asking those few questions can be super helpful.
Yeah, and that goes back to the leadership quality, I guess, like how consistently are leaders doing that, and how to ensure it happens. Yeah, let's see. We will at least squeeze in one more. So Jaak was asking, are you reviewing some engagement metrics with leaders in the 360 feedback debrief, or is that something separate?
That's such a great question. I think our company at this point is still moving into more of a continuous engagement pulse. The last time that we had our engagement was several months ago. So to answer that question short, no, we don't. But I think if we're able to have kind of more of a unified access to engagement as well as 360 feedback, and that's really kind of the age of AI now, where it's able to just consolidate multiple sources of data, I think that would really provide a huge add to our debriefs. It's just another data point, right? But currently, no, because it's outdated now. If you do that, if it's a little bit more continuous and refresh, I would love to include that in our debriefs.
Yeah. Well, ties well into what you said in the beginning. You want to spend time talking about the impactful things and not debating whether this data is reliable or not. So
yeah,
definitely
absolutely
makes sense. All right. Hey, I think it's time to let you, Hazel, get to your day's work. It's still just day starting in there. So thank you very much. Has been really insightful, fantastic session. You're getting a bunch of claps there. So thank you for your time and all the learnings. And yeah, have a really great day, everyone. Thanks for joining this time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Hope this was helpful. I'll see you around. Also, connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to do that. Thank you.